started here. How's everybody doing? Good? Anything new? Nothing at all? Any plans for the weekend? Nothing exciting? No plans? Alright, so last class we left off talking about cognitive development, right? We're thinking of things of how baby learns, categorizes, thinks, conceptualizes, picks up language, right? Form memory, short-term and long-term memory. How parents can help in this process, how social cues can help within this process, right? So we'll kind of continue learning all about that in this next segment. So we can briefly kind of review what we've learned so far, right? All right, we talk about cognitive schemas. We say, hey, we as human beings in general have schemas that are mental representations, mental concepts of things, objects, persons, phenomena, etc., right? We say with assimilation, we're integrating new experiences into pre-existing schemas, right? So we have a new experience, we use things that we've already known, combine the two, new experience with what pre-existing knowledge, and now we formed a new schema, a new concept, right? Things may have become broader because of that. Accommodation, we say new information does not fit with an existing schema, so we adapt and modify the schema, right? So we like, hey, our concept of a cat may change as an infant or toddler because we recognize there's different features of four-legged creatures. They're not all cats, right? They may have some other characteristics about them that doesn't align with their pre-existing knowledge. Therefore, we gotta modify and create a new schema, right? And we say with cognitive equilibrium, we say a balance between assimilation and accommodation, right? A fine balance between the two, using pre-existing information with new experiences versus finding whole new schemas, whole new concepts, right? All right, then we talked about sensorimotor reflexes, right? And we say, hey, in this stage, baby, toddler primarily learns through use of the senses, right? Particularly motor skills, right? Outside of that, maybe hearing and visualization is a big part of learning. So we talked about things like innate reflexes that baby has, rooting and sucking, things of that nature, right? That doesn't have to be taught to the baby. All right, we talked about object permanence, right? We say at certain stages, baby is unaware that once an object leaves its vision, outside of his visual cue, that object's gone forever, right? At some point, we want the child to develop a healthy notion that the object is just left temporarily, it's gone somewhere, right? So we talk about the peekaboo phenomenon. And then we talked about core knowledge theory, right? That potentially there's some theories that, hey, babies are born with some knowledge systems already. Particularly think of things like what we would call almost like a language acquisition device. Almost saying that, hey, evolutionarily, babies should be hardwired, their brains should be wired so that they're able to pick up the language of their forebearers, mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, and all of their lineage, right? They should be pre-wired for that because that's such a survival skill to be able to speak the language, right? Others may differ on it. They're like, oh, you know, there's something that really has to be learned and taught and conditioned. The other concept, like, well, when it comes to numbers, right? Because maybe the first things we're going to be teaching baby is, besides learning how to make these sounds, certain vowels, and certain consonants, and we're going to teach them alphabet and numbers. And so there's a theory of, well, is mathematics something that's inborn inside of us or something that we learn socially, Some people are different. Some people think like, hey, we've been studying this so much that it's part of our evolutionary sort of abilities at this point. All right, and we talked about memory, right? We say, hey, memory works in different ways. One, we have sensory memory. And sensory memory says we take all this information from the external world, right? We hear sound waves that goes in through our ear canal to our eardrum, and it converts into information for us to make sense of sound. We take photons, right? Light particles or waves into our eyes to make sense of sight. Right? We have taste receptors. We have receptors on our skin to inform us about temperature, so we could have the right body temperature, put on more clothes, take off clothes, etc. Right? And like that's memory. But also inside of us, you're like, hey, you know what? Your organs have memory. So if you eat the same stuff all the time, your body will begin to condition and recognize that you're doing that. For example, right? Let's say Dr. Ross has to have his drugs. Caffeine, right? Like, well, his body's used to it because how do we know that? Well, his mind is expecting every day. Usually I do once a day, but I think Tuesdays and Thursdays, my long days, I'll do 2 cups a day. So this is my second cup. Like, hey, your mind is used to the caffeine twice a day, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, the day that you stop having that coffee, you decide no more caffeine, you're going to have withdrawal syndrome. You have a horrible headache, right? You'll be cranky, all these different things, right? So like, hey, your body has memorized that certain things happen at certain times, right? And it'll react to that. Your organs, muscle memory too. You're like, hey, you learn how to ride a bike, that's muscle memory. Not only you memorize the information like physically or just abstractly, you could think of like your whole body's memorized, your muscles, your arms, your legs, what it takes to ride the bike, right, physically. I think sprinters have muscle memories, right? We talk about fast twitch muscles, slow twitch muscles, things like that. Shooting the free throw has a rhythm, so your body has it memorized. So everything has memory, right? We say in terms of it being long term, it's a little bit different than working memory. Working memory requires mental effort for you to recall or recognize the information, right? But we say fill in the blank versus true or false, right? Or A, B, C, or D, right? Pick one, basically. Circle one. You're like, those are different types of information. One is like, hey, you actually saw the word, you remember seeing that word, therefore you can circle it quickly, right? Fill in the blank is like, well, you gotta remember the actual word, how it's spelled, everything else. Different types of memory, right? Or you're like, hey, you know what, more in-depth information is like, hey, do a short-term essay on this concept or topic, right? That requires a lot of memory from a lot of different parts of your brain, not just recognizing the definition of the word itself, right? So you say, hey, you know what? Working memory requires work. That's why it's called working memory. It requires mental effort. Long-term memory requires none. And then we say that central executive function is the processor that regulates cognitive things like attention, action, and problem solving. Right? So you say you use that prefrontal cortex so that you focus on the right things and not everything. Not everything requires focused attention. Right? You look at you think about alternatives, and you make a final executive decision about something for problem solving. We say long-term memory is limitless. You can learn as much as you want to learn long-term, right? And it's permanent. Long-term memory is lifelong. Right? Attention, right? We know that maybe we talked about this, dealing with the pupils. right? You say, hey, we know baby's paying attention if we see a change in the pupils. The eyes get wide, the pupils open up, right? So we can kind of work on baby focusing attention, right? You think of maybe trying to work on if maybe baby has issues with the deficits with attention. Right? We can work on that early, right? Getting it to focus and concentrate instead of being kind of scatterbrained and looking at all the other things in the environment at all times. Right? All right, categorization, grouping different stimuli into a common class. Right now, like at this stage, baby is getting really kind of sophisticated at this point, right? Like, you know what? Because now you have to categorize things. This is different than that, right? A ball is different than a cat, right? Maybe you notice, we could think maybe the baby notices, hey, the cat moves on its own, the ball does not. The cat is an animate object, ball is an inanimate object, right? That you have to do something for the ball. The cat maybe not so much. It may come up to you. Categorizing things, right? I would say categorizing works with stimulus, and that also works with paying attention, right? That focused attention. Yeah, you could be secondhand listening, but are you really listening, right? Want to know if baby's actually focused his attention. We have something that can happen called habituation. So you think of habituation is the concept of you live near a train. At some point, you forgot that you live near a train. You don't hear the sound anymore. But everybody knew who shows up to your house. They're like, wow, you live right next to the L station. That doesn't bother you? Like, I don't pay attention to it. Like, how do you don't pay attention to it anymore? You live here. Because of habituation. My body no longer triggers a stimulus, right? A reaction to this thing that's happening, right? It's almost become a non-factor. Cultural and cognitive development. So we get things like social and cultural context. Right, so we say, hey, culture is really important. Culture is extremely important in terms of how we teach children, and it differs. Could you think of anything from your cultures you think is unique in terms of how they teach children, or how you were raised in some way? Some element of your culture about how you were raised, or what you were taught early on in your life. All right, so you could think of maybe, hey, you know what? In my culture, kind of hands off. Like, hey, the children are expected to learn by observation. There's not that much parental interaction in certain cultures, right? And then other cultures, like, no, everything is hands-on. We are always touching and learning with the child all the time, right? So it's like things are kind of different, depending on the context of the social group or the culture. All right, online immersive, right? So now we got internet, social media, tablets, phone, all the things for digital media to be displayed on for children, right? We have things like online immersion, right? We don't particularly think that watching too much online material is a good thing, right? Because like it creates a distortion between what is presented online versus what happens in a natural environment. So essentially, baby could get confused early if you're showing them too much online content early on. It's confused. It's like, well, is this real or is this real in front of my phase. And it may kind of juxtapose that confusion in a way that might be ineffective to them learning. Right, so we say, hey, they can have transfer deficit. They see something on media or online, and it's hard for them to transfer what they saw online to real life, right? And that can kind of be an issue for the babies. So we say the most effective things is to teach baby in person, right? As opposed to showing them too many online things. We could Bailey scale, but these are just measures of intelligence using blocks, shapes, things about paying attention and how to problem solve. We don't have to get too in depth about that. But it's just basically a development tool to measure infant intelligence. So they can really see if there's huge deficits and what one child can do versus the next. Right, this kind of relates to intelligence tests, right? Information processing assessment. So we could do kind of assessments to evaluate how quickly a child can do something in reference to other children its age. To see also if there's some underlying cognitive issues because of the performance. We could look at visual reaction time. How quickly does a baby respond to something visually? Does it touch it quicker than others? Does it wait? Does it not touch something at all? All right, effects of non-parental care, right? So there's a misconception that non-familial center-based care is damaging to the development, right? What we're saying here, it doesn't always have to be that mom or dad has to be the one to teach the baby, right? There is a level of importance, but baby can learn just enough or even more as long as it has some social interaction, right? So we're saying, hey, what's more important? The level of social interaction, not the people, right? So it's not like it has to be mom or dad. What's most important is that it's someone. It could be cousins, siblings, aunts, uncles, friends, people coming in the household. So we say, hey, the more social interaction, the better, right? Because you can have just mom there, but nothing else, no other social interaction, and that might be worse than if you had, mom not that present, but a lot of other people around. So the more social interaction, the better. Why? Because the more going on, the more connection baby is making in his neurons in his brain, right? So the more things going on, the bigger the connection, right? So it's learning more. I would say that kind of maybe helped me as a baby, being the youngest of 11 kids. I think just being able to watch a lot of people allowed me to get a lot of information quick, right? So I think maybe that kind of helped, right? Mom was busy sometimes, she was working to take care of us, right? Dad was around here and there, but I think having a lot of social interaction helped. All right, so we say high quality care versus low quality care, right? A lot of studies suggest that, hey, people who are low on socioeconomic status in poverty exhibit low quality care with children, which means they're maybe not properly educated to convey the right things to the child at the right times, right? So what's more important is to give quality care instead of just a bunch of care that doesn't really help the child, right? So we say high quality care can be expensive. So think about it, people send their kids to certain daycares or certain schools, right? Certain daycares or certain schools because the quality of basically the education or the care, right? It would be like one university versus another, right? Like, hey, they're learning more sophisticated things than some other place, right? All right, so we're saying poverty does have negative effects on brain development. We say socioeconomic status is more closely related with brain structure in low-income families. Poverty contributes to household chaos, instability, and disorder. All right, so it's like usually if you live in an impoverished environment, there's a lack of stability, right? A lot of randomness, right? A lot of chaos, a lot of disorder. Not good for learning at this stage. We say at this stage, things should be categorized in order, not chaotic. So you can see how these things can have long-term effects on individuals as they get older. Because as a baby, if you experience instability, chaos, order, it's going to make it difficult for you to make sense of it as you get older, right? So we're saying, hey, poverty is a major contributor to brain development and ultimately learning. All right, and then language, early preferences for sounds. Newborn infants are ready to learn language as soon as they are born. Context contributes to developing capacities and preferences. All right, so we say newborns have the ability to learn language at birth, right? But things depend, right? Depends on things. Language learning is contributed by social interaction once again. So we say the most important thing is the social interaction dealing with language. So social input assists in the timing and narrowing of speech sounds. Which means that the more sounds baby hears around the environment, the better off it is, right? The better off it'll start to make connections between different sounds in its mind. So that's why it's even important sometimes to play music for the baby to hear, so it can hear other sounds and make sense of it. All sorts of things that baby can hear in the background. Maybe people talking, or music, or lullabies, or things like that. All right, now baby comes out making what we call cooing. Cooing is the first sounds, right, that baby makes with a vowel. So it would be like da, right? Baby may come out saying da. Or ka, right? Or ba. Right? Usually those are like the first ones. And the first thing you're gonna think of, like, usually da is a very common one, and so the dads always think like, oh yeah, baby knows me, right? Da, right? So that's good, that's healthy. You say baby comes out cooing, making first deliberate vowel sounds. And then we got babbling. Babbling is repetition, repeating strings of consonants and vowels, right? Kind of universal. It goes all languages. All languages, kind of all cultures, where you start to hear this ba-ba, da-da, ka-ka, la-la, things like that, right? Usually it's with the ah. Say the ahs are really prominent amongst babies, right? You're like, it's good. Okay, now it's starting to make sense of both consonants and vowels with, da-da and ma-ma and things of that nature, right? Right, and reinforce, socially interactive, right? It's interactive. Once again, if the parents or guardians or people in the household are reinforcing the cooing and the babbling, quicker baby starts to pick up other words. Because once you start getting, say, the ma and the baba, then you can actually start to convert that into, say, cat, right? Cat or dog or ball or something of the sort. Receptive language. Receptive language is what babies can understand, right? We can't get too sophisticated with them at the beginning, so we have to work with very simple languages. Productive languages, right? What babies can produce themselves. An infant usually speaks their first word at 1 year of age. 1 year, by 12 months, baby should be able to say a real word. Cat, ball. not just da da, ma ma, ba ba. Coach, we say that's babble. Those aren't necessarily real words, but an actual word. They should be able to say dog, cat, ball, something of the sort. We say the first word is what infants usually hear the most. Right? And hollow phrases are one-word expressions to express complete thoughts. That means that the baby may say the same word to convey sometimes different things. But that's a good thing. It still knows one word. Right? All right, fast mapping. So fast mapping has to deal with how quickly does the baby able to convert these sounds into a word. Right? So let's say by 12 months it knows how to say one word. Now we're going to work on how quickly can we take other sounds and convert it to baby saying the second word or third word. And we can time these things, right? We could, as parents, as guardians, as teachers, etc. No, we can time this. We could think of like, all right, let's try to get a goal to have babies say 2 words, I don't know, in 2 weeks, right? Or a word a week at least. Right? We can say, how quickly does it take? Because we're like, hey, a baby is struggling to find a second word and it takes us a month. You're like, well, something's wrong there. That's a long time. But we say, hey, as they grow older, it moves more fast, right? So the ability to fast map improves. We got something called underextension, right? A word more narrowly than it is usually applied so that the word is restricted to a single object. Simply put, that means that we've kind of taken a word and made it so narrow that a baby is only going to apply it in one situation, right? You're like, that could be important. Not every word has so many multiple meanings. So maybe we want to learn something about something specific. We could use some underextension, or it could be bad, right? You're like, hey, you know what, we need to broaden it. But then we had overextension. You're like, hey, now we've broadened the word too much. Now baby is saying one word applied to many different things that do not relate to that word. Right? So we say a healthy balance may be between the use of the word. All right, next we got telegraphic speech, right? We say putting words together, right? Now baby is able to combine words, sophisticated language now, right? So we're getting close, you can form a sentence, basically, right? In some instances with 2 words. What are 2-word utterances you can think of that babies say? For those of you who've been around babies lately. What are some of the first 2 words babies put together that you can think of? Anybody have any small siblings?
I haven't been around a baby in a while. That's what it is again.
I only have a nephew, he's only 4 months.
And, okay, so he's still in cooing and babbling
Yeah,
stage.
now he's learning how to laugh now. His laughing is like, it changed after the day, and I think he's just trying to find his laugh.
Okay, and he's responding specifically to things that are funny.
Mostly funny, or if somebody like get hurt and we say ouch, he laughs.
Okay.
What age do you expect the baby to start like developing like more than 2 words? Like is there like a certain age like for like?
Yeah, so we say 1 word would be a year, right? So 2 words can kind of be anything after a year. I would say maybe a few months after a year.
And then if they hit like a certain age, age where they don't speak that much? Is that like a, what's the word for it? Like, if we reach a certain age and they don't really speak that much?
Yeah, whether, I can't think, it's on the tip of my tongue too, I can't think of it. Okay, but, so 2 words, really what the textbook kind of says that at the very least, it should be 21 months for 2 words. Right, so you're like, hey, that's a year and 9 months. It depends, right? We say the social aspect, if there's a lot of people in the house, baby might be picking up language like crazy, right? If it's just mom in the house taking care of baby, it might be a little bit slower. It may be a year and 9 months, or maybe even a little bit longer than that. Yes, but very important that child is speaking and saying words by a certain time frame, else would kind of predict that you might run into some either speech issues, right? Dyslexia, right? Things of that nature too. Or, you kind of get to the spectrum of autism because you're like, well, there's a deficit, right? That something's going wrong, and so this is going to lead to a huge social kind of issue as the baby gets to go to daycare and school. Other kids are talking, baby's not talking. All right, gestures. Gestures are used before infants can speak. Cognitive and gross motor skills develop more quickly than the fine motor skills required for language, right? Babies naturally make gestures that precede language use. Research shows that baby signing does not contribute to language development, although parents report that baby signing improves ability to communicate. So basically what it said, we're talking about here is babies learn how to gesture before they learn how to speak, right? They may be trying to communicate with their hands, pointing at things, right? Expressing them ways, pointing something on them or touching something that shows that maybe they're in pain or some sort. We say in order to pick up language, you need fine motor skills, right? Not broad, gross motor skills. So that kind of comes over more time. And we say babies can grip fingers really tight as a reflex at birth, right? They're grappling really tight. So tight that you can pick the baby up. Like with one hand, right? Like if they hold on to your finger, like that's strong. Yeah, very strong, right? So like that's innate reflex. But we say fine motor skills is like getting it to hold on to pinch, right? And hold on to something. Right? So as they begin to develop those motor skills, you'll see the language increase. Right? So language is tied more into fine motor skills. All right, and then language recognition capabilities, right? Here we're just talking about really the quality of the social interactions that baby have that kind of promote language. So there's really, the major thing to kind of take is that if there's a lot of communication and this good quality communication in the household, baby will pick up way better speech skills, right, and language skills than if the same patterns of speech are used in the house. So what that says is that baby is ultimately reflecting the quality of the environment in that home for the most part, right? So what you do notice is that kids start to immediately sound like the parents, right? They're emulating exactly the parents, right? Or what's being in the background, music, et cetera, right? They're repeating that information. But you say, hey, if you want your kid to have sophisticated language early on, because we lose language as we get older. So you're like, hey, this is the critical phase to teach baby anything. Like you could teach baby literally any language, and it will get it pretty fast if you reinforce it. Now as adults, our age, difficult for us to learn a new language. because our memory is just not that working the same way as baby is, right? Everything's new for baby. So, depending on what's going on in the house, in the home, baby can get good, high quality language development, depending on the social interactions. Right, which means, hey, with people who are bilingual, excellent kind of social interactions. You're like, hey, you're getting English and maybe some other language, French, Spanish, German, Italian, Arabic, something of the sort, right? Who here is bilingual? So let me ask for the people who are bilingual, do you feel that at any point in time you struggle with the use of certain words in each language? Or did you feel that you perfected one